Just gonna get after it. It's weird that after volume one it said the end, but in volume two there's still storylines. So don't know why that is, but it's past the Finau Ulukalala stage and into the Finau Mojanongo. So now when I say Finau, I'm talking about Finau Ulukalala's son, Mojanongo. So this is chapter two, and we're just gonna get into it. I am building a team at this point to help speed up the process of um, editing and turning it into an edited image and sound video, and trying to get some time to do that. So we'll get right into it. Here we go. In the consequences of Tuitonga's death, the great obstacle to shutting up the communication with Hapai was, for a time at least, removed. But that it might be so more completely, the king came to the determination of having no more Tuitongas, and thus to put a stop forever to the ceremony of Finau Ulukalala is putting a stop to Tuitongas. Never heard that one before, huh? And the ceremony of Inaki. We don't have any ceremonies of Inaki that I know of in Tonga today, but it says right here in Lavatu they stopped having the Moingaongo stopped not only the title of Tuitongas, but the ceremony of the Inaki. Considering that there was very little public utility in what was supposed to be the divine authority of Tuitonga, but that it was, on the contrary, a great and useless expense to the people. So Moingaongo is saying that Tuitonga has no immediate use for the people. It seems that the title of Tuitonga only burdens the people. So Moingaongo wanted to get rid of it and get rid of the Inaki because which is, I mean, when you're looking at it from a company's point of view, if anything is taking up too much resources and it doesn't benefit the profit and the progress of the company, then yeah, you're gonna get rid of that. And it seems right here that Finau wants to get rid of the Tuitonga because of that purpose. At the same time, Eiki, Tuitonga was an Eiki, and his main functions were funerals and the things of God, or at least at the very least, there were funerals, deaths, and stuff like that, and that's why they call it Meapaka Eiki, because that's what the Tuitonga was useful for. Well, now Finau is saying there is no more use to grow all these crops and then have a inaki for the Tuitonga, when the Tuitonga doesn't benefit the people as much as it should. Not to the point where it deserves the inaki or a ceremony where everybody gives up the firstlings of their crops every year. This measure, as may be imagined, did not prove objectionable to the wishes of the multitude, as it relieved them from a very heavy tax, and in times of scarcity, one extremely oppressive one extremely oppressive. So yeah, the people are agreeing. Yeah, that's a heavy tax for us, especially when we don't have it. Like if we don't have anything to give to Itonga, it can become extremely oppressive. So the people are agreeing with you now. In regard to the religious objections, which one might suppose would be started against this measure, it must be noticed that the island of Tonga had for many years been deprived of the power, presence, and influence of Tuitonga owing to its political situation, and notwithstanding appeared no less favored with the bounties of heaven and of nature than the other islands, excepting the mischief and destruction which arose from human passions. So basically saying that the Tuitonga doesn't have that much to do with the people, the progress and provisions and all that resources. And as it is a thing of God, or we do believe that the Tuitongas come from God, it doesn't benefit the people any. Um, we do, want to have the blessings of heaven and whatnot. So this may be uh, an issue for of discussion to see whether or not they should keep it. But so far, the people are good with it. Um, if Tonga therefore could exist without this divine chief, why not Vava'u? So Tonga doesn't exist with the Tui Tonga, it's saying, right? Because it says that for many years, starting this measure, it must be noticed that the island of Tonga had for many years been deprived of the power. So there's no Tui Tonga in Tonga. The presence and influence of Tui Tonga over this political situation, and notwithstanding, appeared no less favored with the bounties of heaven. So Finau is saying, because Tonga doesn't have a Tui Tonga, why should Vava'u? If Tonga therefore could exist without this divine chief, why not Vava'u or any other island? This strong argument, growing still stronger upon a little reflection, brought the chiefs, Matapudas, and older members of society to the conclusion that Tuitonga was of no use at all. So even the older members in society are saying Tuitonga has no use, not one that'll benefit the people anyway. And the people will willing to fall in measure that greatly promote their own interests, notwithstanding a few religious scruples, very soon came to be of the same opinion. So there you go. Vava'u gets rid of Tuitonga. As soon as she now had come to this determination, and to that of shutting up all communication with the Hapai people, it became necessary to acquaint Tonga Mana on his next arrival and to forbid him ever to return to Vava'u. So remember, Tonga Mana in the last chapter is the Tuitonga. Tonga Mana was. Um, and the Patatehi family is the Tuitonga family, or at least that's who they told us was the Tuitonga in the Hapai. But now Finau is saying Tonga Mana comes here for the Inasi feast and the Inasi gathering for the benefit of Tuitonga, but we're gonna tell them that we have no use of Tuitonga here in Lavau anymore, and Tonga Mana will not be recognized, or at least Tonga will not be recognized and taxed, will not no longer tax Lavau. Sounds like he's cutting taxes. Sounds like he is a business guy. Sounds like he is the Trump administration of Lavau at this point because he wants to save the people from taxes if it doesn't benefit the people who even have a Tuitonga at all. As soon as some jurisdiction showing up, okay. So Tongamana is not to be forbidden to come back to Vava'u. In the meantime, however, as we now had promised Tuipulotu that his daughter, Mr. Mariner's adopted mother, should be allowed to proceed to him at the Habais, she was ordered to get herself and attendants ready to accompany Tongamana on his way back. Okay, so there's Luluva'u, and Finau is telling Mariner's adopted mother, Mafi Hape, to get her and her attendants ready to go back to Hapai with Tongamana. Finau promised Tuipolotu that his daughter, so Tuipolotu's daughter is Mafi Hape. Now it happened that this person had a great number of female attendants, many of whom were the handsomest women in Vava'u. And as the leave granted her to depart was equally a license for the departure of her attendants, she now became apprehensive that the expiration or expatriation of so many fine women would occasion considerable discontent among his young men, and perhaps tempt some of them to take the same step. He sent therefore for Makihape and told her that with her leave he would contrive some means to keep back her women, in which she perfectly coincided, two favorite attendants accepted. So Buffy happens to go back to Hawaii, but she had too many pretty girls with her. Mariner's mom, Tokigame's mom, had attendants. Too many of them were pretty, and she now thought, well, maybe we should keep the pretty ones, the young ones, and let the men marry them or have them. And it says here that two of the most prettiest ones said, yeah, they'll stay. Apparently, they like the Vava'u men, in which Masape was okay with it, and the women were okay with it. Matters being so far agreed on, Finau, to avoid the appearance of injunction on his part, gave Mr. Mariner instructions how to act, as if it were a thought and impulse of his own. So Finau saying, instructing Mariner, hey, make it look like this was your idea for the women to stay, so that it doesn't look like I'm trying to force her, want them to stay, which was his intent. But at the same time, he didn't want the pretty girls to stay for his men or for himself. Or so it sounds. Accordingly, when Tongamana was ready to depart, and everyone in it, save Mapihape and her attendants, she was carried on board, and her two favorites immediately followed. At this moment, when the rest of the women were about to proceed into the canoe, Mr. Mariner, who had purposely stationed himself close at hand with his musket, seized hold of the foremost and threw her into the water, and forbade the rest to follow, at the peril of their lives. So Mapape and her women attendants were about to get on the canoe. A couple of them followed Mapape onto the canoe because Mapape was carried onto it. Mariner, standing with a musket, threw one of them back into the water and told all those girls to stay or they're going to get shot. Just so that they can keep the women there for the Wava'u men, it seems. He then called out to Finau's attendants who were seated on the beach to come to his assistance. So he called Finau's men, pretending to express his wonder at their folly in permitting those women to leave, for those protections they had often hazarded their lives in battle. So basically, Mariner is saying, how could you let these women leave? You guys fought and you guys put yourself in danger, and now these women, you fought for them and they should belong to you, it seems Mariner is saying. Upon this, as previously concerted, they ran forward and effectually prevented any of them from departing. While their lamentations yet rent the air, Finau came down to the beach, and inquiring the cause of this disturbance, they told him that Toki, or Mr. Mariner, had used violent measures to prevent their accompanying their beloved mistress, and that the young chief had cruelly assisted him. One of these chiefs, Talo, then addressed Finau, we have all agreed to lose our lives rather than suffer these women, for whom we have so often fought, to take leave of us forever. It is probable that we shall soon be involved or invaded by the people of Hapai, and are we to suffer some of the finest of our women to go over to the men who will shortly become our enemies? So Talo's the guy that Pupunu on the sinking canoe called out and asked Talo to take care of his son. This is Talo. Talo Finau basically came over there and told him what's going on, even though he knew the plan. He's the one who came up with the plan. Mariner. is the accomplice. Made it look like it was his idea, right? They planned this all out, and then Talo agreeing with what Mariner was saying. We put our lives on the line for these women, and now they're going to go back to Hawaii and join the men that are probably going to get together and start coming to war with us. And these are the finest women. Like we feel like we fought and we deserve these women, and we want to keep them here as ours, as our own. Those women, the sight and recollection of whom have so often cheered our hearts in the time of danger and enabled us to meet the bravest and fiercest enemies and put them to the rout. If our women are to be sent away in the name of the gods, send away also the guns, the powder, and all our spears and our clubs, our bows and arrows, and every weapon of defiance. What they're basically saying is we can't live without them, these women. We fought for them, we want them. If you're going to take our women, you might as well take our weapons because there's no purpose of fighting and living and dying if we can't have our women. So this is the argument they're trying to make to keep the women there. With the departure of the women, our wish to live departs also. This almost sounds poetic, right? With the departure of our women, our desire to live, it almost sounds like a Tongan song. Anybody who listens to Tongan song, that's what it sounds like, right? If she goes, she might as well go with my desire to live. For them we shall have nothing left worth protecting, and having no motive to defend ourselves, it matters little how we die. Y forever mate. That's basically what they're saying. If you take our love from us, then we might as well die. Sounds like a Tongan song, which almost sounds like a country song in some point. Finau upon this was obliged to explain to Tongamana the necessity of yielding to the sentiments of these young chiefs to prevent the discontent and disturbance which might otherwise take place. The canoe was now ordered to leave Vava'u for the last time and never more to return, for if she or any other canoe should again make her appearance from Hapai, her approach would be considered hostile and proper measures adopted. The women on the beach then earnestly mentioned or petitioned Finau to be allowed to last farewell to their dear and beloved mistress, which being agreed to, nearly 2 hours were taken up in this affecting scene. Anytime that we say goodbye, it does take a while, right? We're at the airport, we say goodbye to people who are going to go for a long time, go back to Tonga, go back to New Zealand, right? We meet and we talk and we drink kava, we eat, and we say our goodbyes. And that's what they're doing. Maki Hape, Finau Tokyo Kamea's adopted mother, had many attendants and assistants from different young women, right? They are now going to depart from their mom, their mistress, Toki's mom, Mariner's mom, is going to go back to Hawaii, and now they all have to stay. And Mariner said there was a lot of them, and they're saying their goodbyes, and it says right here that it took up a couple hours of saying goodbye to her. These are basically, Mariner's adopted sisters and adopted attendants, family. So they were all told to stay. The young ones, at least, for the young chief to marry and have. From this time, he now devoted his attention to cultivation of the island, and the exertions of this truly patriotic chief were so far successful that the country soon began to assume a more beautiful and cultivated appearance. Nor did he in the meantime neglect those things which were necessary for the better defense of the place. The fortress underwent frequent examination and improvement. In the midst of these occupations, however, a circumstance happened which might have been the cause of much civil disturbance. It is well worth relating, as it affords an admirable character of one of the personages concerned, and shows a principle of generosity which must afford the highest pleasure to those who love to hear of acts of honorable human nature. So those guys go back to Hapai and Finau Monangongo and now builds up Vava'u and Vava'u becomes very bountiful, right? He replenishes everything is grown and crops and Vava'u is made beautiful by all means necessary, as well as fortifying the fortress to make sure their security and strongholds are in place just in case anybody were to attack them. On one of the days of the ceremony known by the name of Tau Tau, Tau Tau, Tau Tau. It's either Tau Tau or Tau Tau. Let's see what it is. The young chief Talo entered into a wrestling match with Hala Api Api. It should, however, be noticed that a few days before, they had held a debate upon some subject in which neither could convince the other, and on such an occasion it is usually to settle the affair by wrestling. Not that this mode is considered in the light of knockdown argument, perfectly convincing in its nature, but it is the custom to end the affair by a contention in physical strength, after which the one who is beaten seldom presumes to intrude his opinion again on the other, at least not upon the same subject. So Talo and Halapi Api have an argument or a debate of some sort a few days earlier, and neither of them could convince the other who's telling who's right and who's wrong. And it says here that typically in the culture, after you have a heated argument where nobody agrees, they will settle it with a wrestling match. And once you win the wrestling match, you win the argument. In other words, you can't bring your point up again if you lost the wrestling match, right? Once you lose the wrestling match, your point is no longer valid, or at least should no longer be mentioned again. That's basically what they're saying. Hala Api Api therefore challenged Talo on the spot. For a long time, the contest was doubtful, both being well made and both men of great strength. At length, however, it was the fate of Talo to fall, and thus the contest ended. The fallen chief, uh, chagrined at this event, I'm assuming that just means was disagreeable, or could not allow in his own mind that his antagonist had overcome him by superior strength. So Talo and Halapiapi wrestle. Talo ends up getting bodied, but rather owing to an accidental slip of his own foot, and consequently resolved to enter the list with him again at some future and favorable opportunity. This occasion of the ceremony of Tao Tao presenting itself, Talo left his companions and sealed himself immediately opposite Halaapi Api, a conduct which plainly indicated his wish that the latter, in particular, should engage with him. So Talo and Halaapi Api, after their argument, wrestle. Talo slips and falls, or he gets body slammed or whatever, and that usually takes care of the argument. But Talo gets back up and gets into the position of being challenged again. Instead of saying, I slipped, he just gets back into position, um, hoping that Halapi Api would attack him again. A conduct to which, though sometimes adopted, is generally considered indicative of a quarrelsome position because the challenge ought not to be made to one in particular, but any individual among those of a different place or party who chooses to accept it. As soon as Halaapi Api and his friends perceived it, it was agreed among them that he alone should oppose him. So in the Tao Tao, if you were to wrestle, it shouldn't be anybody specific. But Salo's using this opportunity, whatever the Tao Tao thing is, to just challenge Halaapi Api based on an argument they had a few days ago. So now everybody's recognizing, oh, Salo's so mad about the argument, and since the first battle between them, it was just whatever. It was based on the South South challenge. Salo keeps on. Looks like he's still wanting to challenge Halapiapi, and everybody's noticing. Oh, he's doing this for that argument that they had, and everybody agreed. Maybe you should just keep on going. Wrestling him. You guys go again. In a short time, Salo arose and advanced Halapiapi immediately close with him and threw him with a severe fall. At this moment, the shouts of the people so exasperated Salo, for he had made sure in his own mind of gaining a victory, that on the impulse of passion he struck his antagonist while rising off him a violent blow in the face, on which Halaapi Api threw himself in a posture of defense and demanded if he wished to box with him. So Talo grabs Halaapi Api on the second time and body slams him. And instead of it just being a wrestling match, Talo gets up, and while he's getting up, punches Halaapi Api. Then Halaapi Api gets in defensive position and says, "Do you want to box? This is supposed to be a wrestling match, buddy. Would you like to box?" Right? He's asking if you just want to just throw hands. Talo, without returning an answer, snatched a toko toko. Um, Footnote says a spear about 5 feet long, used by them as a walking stick, but seldom employed in battle. Yeah, a walking stick, a toko toko, and would evidently have run him through the body if he had not been withheld. So Talo is very mad. Talo's losing his cool. Talo is uh, isn't able to contain himself, to control his emotions. Hala api api, with the nobleness of spirit worthy of admiration, seems to take no notice of this, but smiling, returned to his seat amid the acclamations of the whole assembly. All applauded his greatness of soul, as conspicuous now as on the other occasions. So basically, Hala Api Api got up, asked if he wanted a box. Salo said, instead of Salo saying, yeah, let's box, Salo goes and grabs a walking stick, a toko, and goes over there to attack him with it. Hala Api Api in turn, looked at him and takes notice of it as if nothing happened and just turned back and went and walked down and sat down, allowing Salo to lose his cool. At that, the crowd goes wild for Hala Api Api for keeping and containing his emotions. Now everybody's looking at Salo like, what are you doing? Right? You won in body slamming him, and then you got up to punching him. He asked you if you want a box. You go and grab a stick to hit him with or attack him. Or as Mariner said, he would have ran him through. But Hala Api Api got up and then just went and walked away and went and sat back down. In this big old circle of what we're calling whatever this Tao Tao thing is. It sounds Tao Tao, when you say Tao Tao like that, Tao means war or battle. So when you say Tao Tao, it probably just means battle with each other in wrestling mode. So we've never talked about this or it's never been mentioned, but we're having a Tao here. Tao Tao. Tao Tao Tao. Right? And during this Tao Tao, we're seeing the behavior of two great chiefs and one of them losing his cool, Talo. Finau in particular showed signs of much satisfaction, and in the evening, when he was drinking kava with the Matapules, while this noble chief had the honor of wait on them, the king addressed him, returning thanks for his presence of mind and coolness of temper, conduct which had placed his superiority and bravery in a far more splendid light than if he had given way to resentment. So Moingangon was basically telling him later that night at the Paikava, Finau tells Halapi Api, good job. That was more noble. It was more honorable that you didn't lose your cool. Knowing that Talo lost his cool and his emotion for you to have controlled yourself and just went and sat down. That's very noble of you, of Halapi Api. As to his retiring without seeking further to prolong the quarrel, he was convicted, he's convinced, he said, that he had in viewing nothing but the peace and happiness of the people, which would undoubtedly have been disturbed by an open rupture with a man who was at the head of so powerful a body. To his to this the young chief made only this reply, Go home, Moondi. I'm basically saying, yeah, there's no way I was gonna make a fool of you, Moingalo. You're at the head of our, you're the chief and head of, the military and army, and I did it to make sure that I made us look good. That is such a strong, spirited, to be able to control your emotions like that. That's what real men discuss and compliment each other on. They compliment each other on how well they hold themselves together in the heat of the moment. Like you held yourself well, right? And that's for the most part a lot of people, a lot of cultures are like that. Um, but to be in a fight and control your emotions that way, right? Because it's saying that part again. As to his, retiring without seeking further to prolong the quarrel, he was convinced that he had in view nothing but the peace and happiness of the people, which would undoubtedly have been disturbed by an open rupture with the man who was at the head of so powerful a party. Also, Hala Api Api is saying Talo, being the head of the military, right? It would have been bad form for me to lose my cool to Talo, who's the general of our army. To this the young chief made only this reply, Koho Mo'oni, appearing overcome by a noble modesty as being so much praised, contrary to custom, before so large an assembly. So apparently, customarily, he probably would have kept going and fighting. But nobly, appearing overcome by a noble modesty and being so much praised, contrary to custom, before so large an assembly. Koho Mo'oni, basically saying, all right, you're right. Now you're right. And footnote says, meaning literally, it is your truth. This is what you say is true. Basically saying, yeah, Mo'oni God, which is a common phrase as well. How many of us are capable of that? How many are capable of that? In the heat of the moment, knowing that You're right. Api Api was right. They were in this Tao Tao wrestling match. Api Api overpowered Stalo the first time, even though Meredith said he might have just slipped. Gets back in, and usually, generally, you're just challenging generally. But the general of the army, Stalo, wants to challenge Api Api again, based on an argument they had a few days before. Api Api, they challenge again. Stalo this time body slams him, and while getting up, punches him. Everybody knows that this is all a wrestling match. Why would you punch him? Halapiapi looks up and says, Bafu, do you want a box? Salo turns around, grabs a walking stick, Toko Toko. Halapiapi says, oh, he doesn't want a box. And he goes and sits down. Noble! Noble. And Finau is crediting him that for that nobility. In the meanwhile, Salo, conscious of his error and ashamed to appear in public, retired to one of his plantations called Mote. Mote. While Halaapi Api, imagining his distress of his feelings, resolved upon a recollection, and having animated or intimated this to his men, he desired them to go armed in case any misunderstanding should accidentally arise. Accordingly, one morning they left the Mu'a, giving it out that they were going up the country to kill hogs, lest the circumstance of his men being armed should occasion false and dangerous suspicions respecting his intention, and at the same time he invited several of Finau's men to come and partake of the feast. So soon as they had left the fortress, he imparted to them all his real intentions, to offer Talo his former friendship, and to assure him that he had forgotten the late affair. This goes to show more of Halaapi Api's honor, right? Talo gets embarrassed, knows what he did, is ashamed that he did this in public, knowing how the people feel about somebody losing their cool. Talo goes and stays on his plantation, somewhere about a place he calls Mote or whatever, right? Halaapi Api tells his men, I'm gonna go, tell them that's cool, like Siberia, Oshia, right? His men, on the other hand, tell him, hey, take your weapon, just in case he doesn't forgive you or he takes it the wrong way and wants to kill you. Take your weapon just in case. Let's all go. And so Halapi Api invites some of Finau's guys and his guys to go, not telling them immediately, but as soon as they leave the Mu'a or the capital, they leave. Then Halapi Api tells them, I just want to go tell them that it's cool. Oshia, Saibeya, it's all good, it's all done, and offer my friendship to him. When they arrived near the plantation, Halaapi Api went on a short distance before, and on entering the house of Talo, fast asleep, attended only by his wife and one of her servants, who were employed in fanning him. See, look at that. They still fan each other. He left his spear on the outside of the house and carried his club with him. The noise he made on entering awoke Talo, who, imagining that the other had come to assassinate him, started up and seizing his club, rushed out of the house. Api Api pursued him, asking with, or Api Api pursued him, taking with him his spear, his feelings being greatly hurt to see one fly him so cowardly, who of late had matched himself as his equal, and at length became so exasperated, he threw his spear, which however fortunately got entangled in some bushes. At this moment, Talo was considerably in advance in consequence of the time which it took Halapiapi to go to the opposite side of the house for his spear. The latter was noted, however, for its swiftness, and conscious that he should overtake him, he continued the pursuit. Before Talo had crossed the field of high grass adjoining his house, he was under the necessity of throwing off his natu, and very shortly after his club, which Halapiapi picked up, as though loaded with two clubs, bounded after him with such extraordinary fleet that before they had half crossed the next field he overtook him. Catching hold of him by a wreath of flowers that hung round his neck, he exclaimed with generous indignation, "Where do you expect to escape to? Are you a bird and you can fly to the skies, or a spirit that you can vanish to Polotu? Here's your club, which you so cowardly threw away. Take it and learn that I come not to deprive you of life, but to offer you my friendship, which you once prized so highly." Oh my gosh, Talo, bruh. Talo, you lost just a little bit of respect. But Api goes into Talo's house, leaves his spear outside, but takes his club in, and the sound that he makes apparently walking in there, Talo hears it, wakes up, right? There's two women fanning him, hears it, wakes up, looks, and runs out the house and runs into the plantation and takes off. Api runs over to where his spear is, grabs his spear, and chases after Talo. He chases him down, running. But Natu falls off, so they're probably running butt naked at this point, or one of them is at least, to catch up to him. And Api finally catches up to him, tackles him with two clubs in his hand, tackles him, and basically starts clowning on him. Like, where do you think you're gonna go? Are you a bird? You gonna fly away? You a spirit? You gonna go to the spirit world? Where are you going? And gave Talo back his spear and told Talo, here, and Halabi told Talo, here, take your spear, take your club. I'm not here to kill you. I'm here to call it, to squash everything, make everything cool, and be friends again. With that, he embraced him and tearing his own natu, gave him half to wear. So I guess Talo was butt naked at this point because his um, natu fell off. Halapi Api they get up. Halapi Api tears his in half and gives it to him to wear to cover himself. By this time, Halapi Api's men coming up, he dispatched them immediately to the garrison to prevent any disturbance which might arise from a false report of this adventure. For a few of Talo's men, being near the house and mistaking Halapiapi's intention, imagined the fate of their chief inevitable, and had betaken themselves immediately to the garrison with a view to excite the adherents of Talo to revenge his death. So Halapiapi's men finally show up, and just so that everything can be okay, Halapiapi tells them, go to the garrison, go to the fortress. Talo's guys, they panic. They ran to the fortress and they're gonna go spread a rumor that I'm trying to kill him or something. So go and make everything okay. So he sends all the men back to the fortress. He was a powerful chief and belonged to the former garrison and would undoubtedly have had most of the chiefs of Ava'u for the avengers of his cause. The Avengers, basically saying Talo was a powerful chief and belonged to the former garrison and would undoubtedly have had most of the chiefs of Ava'u for the avengers of his cause. The two chiefs returned as soon as possible to Feretoa to show the people that they had entered again into a friendly alliance. When they arrived, they found the whole place in a state of disturbance, all being up in arms, party against party, but at the sight of them, matters were soon adjusted and their mutual friendship became stronger than ever. We talked about how the heat of battle between siblings, between people who love each other, just like between Moingangongo and Mariner, when Mariner walked in and sneezed in the house, that bond or that heated moment, that contention, actually welded their relationship together. And I think that's what Api Api and Salo just did. This this contention between two people who love each other, just like sibling rivalry. The heat of the moment of battle between the two melded them, and now they're closer than ever. That's what contention can do sometimes. That's what fighting can do sometimes. And I think it comes from the aftermath of it because you have the build up of argument and contention, then you have the physical fight and whatever. It's the aftermath. I think the welding comes from the forgiving because if we can get through all this heat and still be friends and still love each other, it's the forgiving part that I feel like is the final weld in the relationship. Meaning, if we can get past this, we can get past anything between two siblings, two friends, or whoever else um, that love each other. That the welding part of consenting is the forgiving, right? A short time after this, the people of Hapai clearly showed their intention of commencing hostilities, but were defeated in the very act by vigilance and bravery of some of Finau's young warriors, among whom Mr. Mariner had the honor to take an active part. One day, most of the large sailing canoes were launched for the double purpose of procuring from some of the outer islands a quantity of coarse sand, and to convey those whose business it was to cut flagstones for the grave of Tonga to different places. Coarse sand. This was to cut flagstones. So very fine sand. There's an island out there with very fine sand near Mava'u. Owing, however, to contrary winds, they were not able to make the shores of Mava'u that evening, and in consequence, Finau, who was with them, proposed to remain at the island of Tonga during the night. So they went to Tonga Tapu to get some sand to make flagstones of some sort for the cemetery or headstones or whatever. But Finau wanted to stay in Tonga overnight. Shortly afterwards, they received intelligence from a fisherman that a canoe, apparently from Hawaii, was approaching, and it was supposed with a hostile intent, as she had a quantity of arms on board and many men. Many, 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 many men. In consequence of this, the young warriors requested of Finau leave to proceed in small canoes, the wind being unfavorable for large ones, to cut them off. So basically, there are ships from Hawaii coming over now, and some of the young warriors wanted to stop them, or at least cut them off, while they're stuck in Tonga. After a due consultation that this was granted, and 11 canoes, manned with the choicest warriors, paddled towards a small island at a little distance on which the Hapai people had landed. As it was a moonlight night, the enemy saw them and concealed themselves behind certain bushes at a small distance from the beach, where they supposed Finau's men would land. They were right in their conjecture. As soon as Finau's warriors were arrived, the enemy rushed upon them with their usual yell, and occasioned much disorder and alarm. But the Vava'u warriors soon rallying, they pressed in return so closely and bravely on their opponents that they were obliged to retreat towards the place where their canoe lay. So they're in Tonga. The Hapais are coming over there with hostile intentions. The Vava'u guys go to cut them off. The Hapai guys get onto land, onto shore, go into bushes, hide. But since the moon was lit or bright enough, they could be in the bushes and see onto the beach when the Vava'u guys get there. Now, Vava'u guys have 11 canoes. However many people 11 canoes hold, depending, and they were small canoes, so depending on how many were in each canoe, it could have been 10 each. That's 100 people. But we don't know exactly how many people were on there. Anyway, so they get on there, they go and they fight. As soon as the Hawaii guys see the Vava'u guys, they get out there and they start fighting. And the Vava'u guys stand their ground and beat the Hawaii guys back to their canoes. Here a most severe conflict ensued. Unfortunately, in hurrying on shore from the canoes, Mr. Mariner's ammunition got wet, which rendered his musket of little use. Hence, he was obliged to employ only a bow and arrows. The enemy, finding themselves so well matched, and thinking they might soon be attacked by forces from the main land, Vava'u, embarked as speedily as they could, in doing which they lost 10 or 12 men. So, trying to get up out of the boat, out of the canoe, Mariner's gun gets wet, so he can't use that. So now he has to use clubs and or bows and arrows. Everybody else has clubs and spears, and they're beating off the Hapai guys, and the Hapai guys eventually get away, but not before the Vava'u guys took 10 or 12 of their men. Mr. Mariner again tried to use his musket, and after repeated trials, succeeded in shooting the two men that steered, it being a double canoe. Oh, there's two men that steer the double canoe. After which he returned with his own party to their canoes, leaving 19 of the enemy dead on the field, besides the two killed in the canoe. Their own loss was 4 killed on the spot, and 3 others who died afterwards of their wounds. So they lost 7. The Hapai guys lost 10 to 15, and now they're all on. The enemy were about 60 in number. The 50, wait. The enemy were about 60 in number, and they had 50. So Hapai guys were 60, Vava'u guys 50. Vava'u guys came up. Looks like they were good warriors. If they took 10 to 15 of their guys, so Vava'u lost 12 plus the 2 in the canoe, that's 14. And Vava'u lost 2, 6, 2, 4, 2 minutes here, less than 10. In this affair, Mr. Mariner unfortunately received a violent blow on the knee by a stone from a sling. And they have slings. Didn't even think about that. They have bows and arrows, they have spears, they have clubs, and they have slings. How do they know how to use it? I don't think we have talked about slings and slingshots. We have talked about it. But dang, for them to shoot something so hard as to damage Mariner's knees, crazy, which lamed him for a considerable length of time. It appeared from the account of a boy who was wounded and taken prisoner that the enemy intended to proceed as secretly as possible to the westward of Avau, and under cover of the night make incursions on shore and do all this mischief in their own power. This in modern day would be like a drive-by. What is Hapai doing just sitting around in Hapai and then now would want to creep up and sneak up on Rava'u at night just to go and create some war and battle and incursion in Rava'u? That's crazy that they would just do that out of, you know, for whatever reason. There could be many reasons. For their chiefs, for their countrymen, for power, just to prove to themselves or prove to others that they're tough. But Hawaii guys are really just some bothersome dudes. For the space of 2 months after this affair, no circumstances worthy of note took place. No other attack from the people of Hawaii was attempted, and all seemed peaceable and quiet. About the end of this period, however, there happened a circumstance the most fortunate of all to Mr. Mariner, that of his escape. Uh-oh, we're about to lose Mariner. In this time of peace, when he had nothing in which to employ himself but objects or recreation and amusement, sometimes with Finau or other chiefs, and sometimes by himself, he would frequently go out for 2 or 3 days together among the neighboring islands on a fishing excursion. As he was one evening returning homeward in the canoe after having been out 3 days, he he espied he espied a sail in the westward horizon, just as the sun had descended below it. This heart-cheering sight no sooner caught his attention than he pointed it out to the 3 men with him, his servants that worked on his plantation, and desired them to paddle him on board, holding out to them what an advantageous opportunity now offered itself to enrich themselves with beads, axes, looking glasses, etc. So, as the sun was going down on this fishing excursion, Mariner sees a ship, and he tells his guys, "Look, there's a ship. Let's go so we can get more beads, axes, and all kinds of stuff from this ship that's coming, and paddle me out there." So he's telling his servants, the ones who work on his plantation, to paddle him out there. An opportunity which they might never again meet with. So I'm sure they're excited. To this they replied that they had seen it before, but that their fear of his wishing to go on board from preventing them pointing it out to him, having often heard their chief say that they never meant to let him go. Hence, they were apprehensive if they suffered him to escape, that their brains would be knocked out on their return. So basically, the servants are telling them that they're hesitating taking Mariner because they've heard the chief before telling them, make sure he doesn't escape. Don't let him escape. So now the warriors or the servants themselves, they don't want their brains to get knocked out, so they're telling them, I don't know if we should do this, man. Mr. Mariner then condescended to entreat them to pull towards the vessel, promising them very rich rewards. After conversing together and whispering something between themselves, they told him that, notwithstanding their great esteem and respect for him, they owed it as a duty to their chief to refuse his request, upon which they began to paddle towards the nearest shore. So Mariner promises them, I'll make you guys very rich. Just get me to that ship. They talk amongst each other, whisper, they're saying, no, we can't do that. As much as we esteem you, we hold you high up there, but we can't do it because our chief. We have a chief that would probably be mad if you got away, if you got on one of those ships and left. Mr. Mariner instantly demanded in an elevated tone of voice why they talked about the fear of chiefs. Were they not his servants, and had he not a right to act with them as he pleased? He then took his musket from behind him. Then the man who sat nearest immediately declared it. If he made any resistance, he would die in opposing him, rather than allow him to escape. Upon this, Mr. Mariner summoned up all his strength and struck him a most violent blow, or rather stab, near the loins, with the muzzle of the piece, exclaiming at the same time, Toki, ho'otua kohomate. He says, Taki ho'otua kohomate. This lunge produced a dangerous wound, for the musket, being a very old one, had grown quite sharp at the muzzle, and was besides impelled by the uncommon force with which the prospect of escape inspired him. What? Sagiho Otua Kombate, meaning literally strike your Otua, there's your death, which are forms of energetic expressions used like oaths on extraordinary occasions calculated to express vengeance. Okay, interesting, but I still don't. So Mariner grabs his musket and threatens them. Upon this, Mariner summoned up all his strength. So the man who sat nearest to me declared that if he made any resistance. So Mariner grabs his musket. The guy sitting next to him tells him, "If you make any resistance, we're gonna have to take you down." Mr. Mariner takes his musket and stabs him in the leg near the groin, proclaiming to him, "Ta kiho otua, combate, strike your god, there's your death." They're getting buck wild on this canoe here. The man fell flat in the bottom of the canoe, senseless and scarcely with a groan. This man whose name was Deufononga well deserved the fate he met with. He used to beat his wife unmercifully, for which Mr. Mariner had frequently knocked him down with a club. He formerly had a wife who, in time of scarcity, he killed and ate. Since that time, having several children, more than he wished, he killed a couple of them to get them out of the way. His best quality being an excellent fisherman and a very hard-working fellow. So he worked hard. This Deufanua guy, that Mariner stabbed in the leg, Mariner saying, no, he deserved that death. He used to beat his wife a lot. He killed a couple of his kids to get them out of the way, which, wow, that's crazy. They wouldn't be punished for that. And one of his well, he beat his wife before he was, and he had a wife he killed and ate. So yeah, Teufonua or Teufononga, yeah, this Teufononga guy, yeah, I agree. He deserved that death or this type of death. Um, then presented his musket to the other. Okay, Mr. Mariner instantly um, pulled his legs out straight, then presented his musket to the other two, who appeared somewhat panic-struck, and threatened to blow out their brains if they did not instantly obey his orders. They accordingly put about and made towards the vessel. So after he stabs this guy in the leg, he threatens to blow these two guys' brains out, and then they say, "Okay, we'll paddle you to that ship." The one whom Mr. Mariner wounded was a piece of a warrior, but the other two had never been in battle, and as he supposed imagined he could fire off his musket when he pleased without loading it. Be this as it may, they were now perfectly obedient, and he encouraged them farther by remaining them that they had a good excuse to make to their chief, since it was by compulsion and not by will that they acted. So when Mariner's basically saying that the guy who died was kind of a warrior, he may have been in the battle or not, but the other two weren't warriors. They never fought. Or else they would have known that Mariner can't fire his gun because he didn't load the musket. But at the same time, it seems like Mariner's telling them, look, now your chiefs will see I stabbed the guy, and your chiefs are going to accept your apology because now they know that you did it because I commanded it and not because you guys wanted to, which is a good excuse, hopefully. In the meantime, he kept a strict eye upon both upon them and the man in the bottom of the canoe, upon those lest they should take an opportunity to upset it and swim to shore, with which they were well acquainted, and upon this lest he should recover and make an unexpected attack. They did not come up with the vessel till about daylight next morning, owing to the distance that they had to go, for they were about 4 miles off the northwest part of Oahu, and the ship bore west-southwest, about 5 miles distant, steering under easy sailed to the north end of the island, besides which they were much fatigued with having pulled about the whole day against the heavy sea, and were short of any provisions except raw fish. So it took them all night to paddle over to where the ship was. Because remember, as soon as the sun went down, they saw the ship. Meredith said, "Take me over there." They had the whole fussing and fighting all the way over, and it took them all night to finally get to where the ship is. Because morning, the sun is coming up at this point. During the night, the man in the bottom of the canoe lay perfectly still and showed no signs of life except now and then a slight gurgling noise in his throat. As soon as the canoe pulled up alongside the brig, Mr. Mariner, without stopping to hail, on the impulse of the moment, jumped up into the main chain, and was very near being knocked overboard by the sentinel, who took him for a native, for his skin was grown very brown, his hair very long, and tied up in a knot, with a turban round the head, and an apron of the leaves of a sea tree around his waist. Interesting. So as soon as they get to the ship, Mariner climbs up it, grabs some chains and climbs up it, and gets himself on board. But by then, Mariner has his tapa on. He has sea leaves right from the sea tree around his waist. His hair is long and he's tied up in a ponytail or whatever. And they mistake him as a native. So it says right here, um, very near being knocked overboard by the sentinel. So he almost got knocked overboard because he was mistaken for a native. This disguise would have warranted the conduct of the sentinel, but as soon as Mr. Mariner spoke English and told him he was an Englishman, he allowed him to come on deck, where the captain cordially shook hands with him. So after that, all he had to do was speak English, right? And they took him as an Englishman, and the captain accepted it. The latter had heard from the captain of a schooner the whole unfortunate affair of the Port-au-Prince, for the schooner brought away 2 men from one of these islands, while Mr. Mariner was in another quarter upon some business in Port Finau. So the captain heard about the Port-au-Prince, and the captain has heard from another ship that the other two that got on from 2 or 3 chapters ago in Volume One that got on a ship and they wouldn't accept Mariner because there are too many people. And then Mariner goes back and ends up being made fun of or whatever. But the captain himself has heard, like they tell stories enough to where different ships hear different stories, which is, I guess it's common. But that's cool. That he did that. He knows about the whole Port-au-Prince thing. The captain knows. The captain now presented him with a pair of trousers and a shirt, and the latter being neither very new nor very clean. He took the pains to wash it, and hung it up in the rigging to dry. In the morning, however, it had appeared at the honest instigation of somebody, hence his whole stock of appeal consisted of the said pair of trousers, nor did he get better provided till he arrived in China about 7 weeks afterwards. What? This is the thing about reading. If anybody knows, it's like reading the scriptures. It's almost as if you have to read it a couple times to even make sense of it, right? The captain now presented him with a pair of trousers and a shirt, and the latter being neither very new or clean. So the shirt and trousers were dirty. He took the pains to wash it and hung it up to dry. Okay. So Mariner got clothes that were dirty. Then he washed them himself and got more up to dry, hung them up to dry. In the morning, however, it had disappeared at the honest instigation of somebody. Hence his whole stock of apparel consisted of the said pair of trousers. So after he hung it up, somebody came and took it. Now somebody's out there wearing clean clothes. Nor did he get better provided till he arrived in China. So 7 weeks later. So I guess Mariner's leaving because he didn't get nice clothes until they got to China 7 weeks after they left. But to return to the subject, the brig proved to be the favorite, Captain Fisk, from Port Jackson, about 130 tons burthen, having on board 90 tons of mother of pearl shells procured from the Society Islands. Society, where we discovered Society was? I think it was Tahiti, because the Sandwich Islands is Hawaii. Navigators, Samoa. So the Cook Islands is Tahiti. I'm pretty sure that was Tahiti. She intended to make up her voyage with sandalwood from the Fiji Islands, and thence to proceed to China. On Mr. Mariner requesting the captain to give the men who brought him some beads as a reward for their trouble, and also an act as a present for Finau, he liberally complied, and the canoe left the ship with a message from Mr. Mariner to the king, requesting him to come on board. So they get on board, and Mariner says, "Hey, do you have any beads and act to give these guys to bring me over here?" Boom, the captain uh, readily complies with that, and it's all good. But now Mr. Mariner wants to talk to you now. As to the wounded man, he was in all probably dead. At least the other two seemed to think so by his not stirring, and they took no trouble with him. By this time there were about 200 small canoes near the vessel, and several large ones, so that all the people of Avao seemed to be assembled to view the brig, for the whole beach was also crowded. As the vessel was very short of provisions, a brisk traffic was now carried on with the natives by the captain and mate for yams and hogs, etc., and orders were taken to the crew not to purchase any more trinkets till they had procured plenty of provisions. About the middle of the day, Finau came alongside with his sister, and several of her female attendants, bringing off as a present for Mr. Mariner 5 large hogs and 40 yen, each weighing not less than 30 pounds, and some of the largest 60 or 70. Damn. So they brought a lot of hogs. These things Mr. Mariner begged leave to transfer. It was a very common thing among the natives to transfer presents. Transferred to the captain and presented them accordingly. Notwithstanding repeated messages from the chief on shore to Finau, requesting him to return, he resolved to sleep on board that night if the captain would allow him, which he readily did. The women, however, intimated their wish to return, not liking the thought of trusting their persons among a number of strange men, and a mariner and Mr. Mariner found it very difficult to remove their scruples, assuring them that they should not be molested. So some of the women are telling Mariner, we want to go too. We don't want to stay in Vava'u, apparently. But Mariner had to appease obviously Finau and the other chiefs and told the women, you're going to be okay here. Don't worry. You'll be taken care of well. At length, however, they consented to remain on his promise to take care of them and to roll them up in a sail in which state they lay all night in the steerage and, as they said, slept comfortably. Oh boy, I would have to reread something so I can understand it. It seems like I didn't get that part. Oh boy. So the women, however, intimated their wish to return, not liking the thought of trusting their persons among a number of strange men. So the women themselves wanted to return back to shore because they didn't want to sleep among the Palangis. That's weird. And Mr. Mariner found it very difficult to remove their scruples, assuring them that they should not be molested. Mariner's basically telling them it's okay. You're not going to be taken advantage of here on the ship. Apparently, at length, however, they consented to remain on his promise to take care of them and to roll them up in a sail, in which state they lay all night in the steerage, and, as they said, slept comfortably. So the women were comfortable. Mariner rolled them up in a sail, and they slept in the steerage. They're okay. As to Finau, he was very well contented with sleeping on a sail on the cabin deck. And the weather being remarkably fine, the brig did not come to an anchor, but stood off and on during the whole night. At daylight, canoes came alongside in great numbers, but from prudent motives, dictated by former disasters, no more than 3 of the natives were allowed to come on board at a time, 6 sentinels being kept constantly on deck for that purpose. So basically, the ships, and this is what was common when ships got to Tonga, is especially after the Port-au-Prince, is to make sure that not too many people get on board. They obviously have heard what happened to the Port-au-Prince, or just to be safe, you're getting stories back from the people who did return to England. Just to be safe, don't have too many natives on the ships, and this is what they're doing, 3 at a time, to come look, to come trade, to come sell, and whatnot. In the canoes were several chiefs who came to request Finau to return on shore, as the people were greatly alarmed lest he should form a determination of going to Papalangi land of white people. They brought off some kava for him, but which he declined drinking, saying that he had tasted some on board. So he's calling it kava, which was wine, which was far preferable. Indeed, he considered it so much superior that the thought of kava quite disgusted him. So the chiefs, there are chiefs that come the next morning to try to get on board. They bring kava, and Finau is saying, "No, I don't want to drink that kava. I had kava here. Their kava is way better than ours." Basically, is what he's saying. It was wine, but he's saying it's more favorable. This is better, right? Because I'm sure once he started drinking wine, he got drunk, and he's telling them that no, that kava, our kava is disgusting compared to this stuff, right? He says the thought of kava quite disgusted him. He made a hearty he made a hearty dinner at the captain's table, ate plenty of roast pork, with which he admired very much the flavor of the sage and onion. The fowls he cared little about, but partook of some main dishes. The ladies also ate very heartily. He now handled a knife and fork, though for the first time in his life, with very great dexterity. Sometimes, indeed, the Majesty forgot himself a little and laid hold of the meat with his fingers. So this is the first time Finau Ulukalala uses a knife and fork because that's what they're using to eat, and he's eating heartily with it. Rah, 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 right? He's going to town. And Murder's saying sometimes he forgot to use a fork, he just uses his hands, which is, what obviously they're used to because that's what they do. But instantly recollecting that he was doing wrong, he would put it down again, exclaiming, "Weh, Guategalo." Guategalo, eh? Then he's saying, I forget myself. The natural politeness which he evinced on every occasion charmed the captain and the officers so much they could not help acknowledging that it is far surpassed any other instance of good manners they had witnessed among the inhabitants of the South Sea Islands. They're calling him good mannered because he was eating, right, with a knife and fork, and he forgot at some point to use the fork, and he used his hand, and as he used his hand, he noticed and acknowledged his mistake and went with the and grabbed his fork and used again. And the captain and the other shipmates are telling him that's probably the most, as far as manners is concerned, that we've seen out here in the South Pacific, which is interesting, right? They, so it says the natural politeness which he evinced on every occasion charmed the captain and the officers so much they could not help acknowledge that it far surpassed any instance of good manners they had witnessed among inhabitants of the South Sea Islands, and not only in behavior, but in intelligence he seemed to excel. So the captain and the officers are saying not only in his behavior and his politeness and manners and everything, but he's smart. He's an actual intelligent guy, which is something apparently they didn't see much of in the other islands. But because he was, it seems like the higher up you go in society here, free thinking and warlike mentality and all that knowledge is really the main endeavor, right? Where they're not so guarded from phalanges or treacherous, or their mind is stuck on um, something bad or evil for them to do to the point where he really is just being, himself. Especially knowing how curious they both are about the warlike behaviors of England. His inquiries about the use and application of what he saw were frequent and indeed troublesome, but then his deportment was so affable, and his manner so truly polite, nobody could be offended. The use of application of what he saw was frequent, indeed troublesome. So basically, saying he made a lot of inquiries about a lot of things, was troubled about a lot of stuff, but he did it so genuinely that nobody could be offended about the way he was saying it or asking or inquiring about whatever it was on the ship. He requested permission to lie down in the captain's bed that he might be able to say what none of the people of Oahu could boast of, that he had been in a Babalangi bed. Permission being readily granted, he lay down and was delighted with his situation, and said that being now in an English bed, he could fancy himself in England. That's funny because all he wanted to do was just lay down in the bed, and that is something that it's common. Like even growing up in Tonga, right? Everybody brags about something that they did, that they've seen, because in Tonga there are things that they haven't seen or done, right? Now they've seen everything on, you can see it online, but there are a lot of things that people go and see and they boast about. Now Finau at this point has been in a Palagi bed, and now he can see himself. Oh man, I can live in England, right? Sometime after being left in the cabin by himself, though watched unknown to him, he did not offer to take or even touch a single bead or anything else excepting the captain's hat, but which, not choosing to put on without asking leave, he went on deck on purpose to request Mr. Mariner to obtain permission to the captain for so great a liberty. So different was he from the generality of these islanders, who, situated by curiosity, if not by less honest motive, would not scruple to take a man's hat off his head unbidden, twirl it about, and be very careless as to returning it if not reminded by the owner. About So we're seeing how what good of a person Finau is. What Ngangongo is. It's almost like a childlike innocence of he was being watched in the cabin, and the only thing he wanted to look at or touch or whatever was a hat. And instead of just grabbing it, putting it on, and walking out with it, he took it and walked up on deck with it and asked Mr. Mariner if he could, you know, basically asking permission. Hey, can I put this on? Can I check this out? In which they let him check it out. He folded it around, put it on, whatnot, and would have returned it. So just a polite and well-mannered person. Um, about the middle of the day, Finau went on shore to quiet the people who were become very clamorous on account of his long stay. But he returned on board soon after, bringing with him a quantity of cooked victuals, ripe bananas, etc., for the crew, and also a present for the captain, consisting of a valuable spear and club, a large bale of ngatu, a large hog, and 100 small yams, and 2 canoe loads of coconuts. So delighted was he now with everything he saw on board, so high an opinion he had of the character of the Papalangis, and so desirous was he of arriving at those accomplishments which raised them to so high above the Tonga people, he could not help several times expressing his wish to accompany Mr. Mariner to England. So he already knows Mr. Mariner is leaving, and he looked up to so much of this stuff that he made a few comments and gestures that man, he thought that was a month ago. I don't know, still England. I mean, he really wants to go and check it out. On the third day, which was the day of the brig's departure, his importunity, what his importun, Importunities on the subject became extremely urgent, so much so that Mr. Mariner could not refrain expressing them to the captain. Importunities on the subject. So basically, Finau wants Finau wants Mariner to ask the captain if he can go with. Like, I would really love to go to England. Can I come? So Mariner goes and asks the captain, but it says here, but who refused, as might be expected, to accede to a wish which seemed to promise no future good to an individual in Finau's circumstances, arriving in a strange country without protection and without patronage. So basically, the captain is looking out for Finau, telling him, "No, you're not ready for this type of life. You don't know. You don't understand what you want, right? All he sees are these simple joys and simple, luxuries that they enjoy, but the entire life of England isn't something for somebody from a savage island to be thrown into, especially if he has nowhere to go, no one to stay with, no protection, nobody to feed him and whatnot. It's just a different lifestyle. This was a sore disappointment to one who was willing to make such large sacrifices for the accomplishment of his hopes, to one who would have resigned a princely state and dignity, and all the respect paid by obedient subjects to an arbitrary monarch for the sake of visiting a country where, as Mr. Mariner explained to him, he could expect at best but a very inferior mode of life, compared with what he had been accustomed to. But his arguments were all in vain. Finau could not be divested of his wishes. He thought if he could but learn to read and write and think like a papalangi, a state of poverty with such high accomplishments was far superior to regal authority in a state of ignorance. Man, the mentality of some of these people are mind blowing. Because what boy I always basically saying is, I'd rather go to England, learn to read, write, and be educated with the vast amount of education you guys have, and live in poverty and have nothing, than to live here in the great state of chiefdom and kingdom and whatnot and be ignorant. He's basically saying knowledge is power, knowledge is wealth. Boy knows and believes that. No, it's knowledge. I don't care if I'm poor. I don't need any of that stuff. All I want is knowledge. Think like a papalangi, a state of poverty with which high accomplishments was far superior to regal authority in a state of ignorance. Authority, he was willing to leave authority in a state of ignorance to go and live in poverty and be armed with the wealth of knowledge and education. That is noble right there. That is a noble, ambition. Seeing, however, that his wish was this time at least destined to be thwarted, he made his friend solemnly promise, and before their final separation, make him again repeat that promise and swear to the fulfillment of it by his father and by the God who governed him, that he would some time or another return or endeavor to return in a large canoe, a ship, and make him away with him to England, and in case his subjects should stand averse to such a measure, that he would complete his project by force of arms. Mr. Mariner having repeated this promise, he now embraced him and shed tears. Um, Finau, Waigaomo really wants to go to England. He really wants to learn how to read. He really wants to learn how to write and be educated like Palangis are and to know to have their knowledge, right? It isn't the wealth that a noble man wants in a savage nation. No. It's the wealth of knowledge, of education. That is amazing. Moingangongo just shot to the top of the list with this one. I want to read that part again. He made his friend solemnly promise, and before their final separation, made him again repeat that promise, and swear to the fulfillment of it by his father and by the God who governed him, that he would sometime or another return, or endeavor to return, in a large ship, and take him away with him to England. And in case his subjects should stand averse to such a measure, that he would complete his project by force of arms. Mr. Mariner, having repeated this promise, we now embraced him and shed tears, basically saying, man, dude, follow missing Mike. I don't know what Fuakawa Mike. That was what he said. Fuakawa Mike. Fuakawa Mike to get fucking Mike. Mafu Waka. Get the fucking England. Like, I really want to go. I don't care if these guys try to hold me back. I will fight them to leave and go back to England with you, just to be able to have the education of hockey. It would be very interesting to know what would be the result of removing an individual's Finau's disposition and his intellectual powers from the state of society in which he had been brought up into a civilized country, into a scene so widely different from everything he had been accustomed to, where every circumstance would be new and every object calculated to draw forth the powers of his natural understanding. Finau's intellect, as we shall see, by and by more clearly see, to take a survey of his character, was very far above the common. There was interwoven in the very texture of his mind a spirit of philosophical inquiry, directed by the best of all motives, the desire of human improvement, not the offspring of common curiosity, but that noble impulse which goads the mind on the pursuit of knowledge at whatever risk and with whatever suffering. But we must leave this subject for the present to take a further view of the transaction on board. They're saying these are the savages, without description, savage brute. But for a man to come out of this type of society, a man who only wants to go to a different country to acquire the knowledge of Palangi, to acquire the education of Palangi, to want nothing more to give up his power and his seat as king, just to go live as a poor person with much knowledge and power. I think they very adored that ambition of Finau. You know, like, dang, that's crazy. This guy would rather come over here to England and live broke just to go to the library for free. That's that's crazy. That's crazy. But at the same time, anybody who's in Tonga at this point in time, I'm sure they would have. A lot of them would have shared the same sentiment. Of course, a lot of the lower ones, right? The lower mind, and this all has to do with mind. The societal breakdowns in Tonga seemed like it was based on intelligence. Who was able to do the most, and then break them down to the ones who will do the very least, right? Who have no other ambition than just to go and cook. I think the cooks were the lowest, and then the peasants, the ones who lived off of everybody else's work, basically the welfare people, the regular parents, the peasants were the lowest below the cooks. The captain had a quantity of pearl oyster shells, which are considered by the natives a very beautiful ornament, and very scarce among them, as those which they have are not capable of being so finely polished. These attracted Finau's fancy, which the captain observing, made him a present of several. But however he did not direct his attention to mere matters of ornament, reflecting that he had very few gunflints on shore, he ventured in a very modest manner to ask the captain for a supply of an article that would be so useful to him in defending his newly established kingdom of Avao against the encroachments of the Hapai people, and the captain liberally complied with his request. So basically, finally, Finau knows he's going to stay, and the captain has pearls, gives him some pearls, which are precious in the Western world. But Finau is like, "Oh, that's cool, thanks, appreciate it." How about that gunpowder though? How about some of them shots? So that's gonna be more to me than these pearls, because at least I get to project myself against these savage, brutal, hot by guys who keep on attacking us. And the captain freely complied. He now knew the use of a musket exceedingly well and was a very good shot. So he must have practiced it a lot, and now he needs more gunpowder and shots. What else is here? He's allergic to this book that he has. Okay. Mr. Mariner had on shore, in a concealed place, the journal of the Port-au-Prince, which he was now desirous of securing. The reader may be here reminded, that in the early part of Mr. Mariner's residence at the island, the late king ordered him to give up his books and papers, which were afterwards burnt as instruments of witchcraft. It happened, however, fortunately, that he had concealed this journal beneath the matting of the house, and thus it escaped the flames. After that period, reflecting what a risk there was of its being discovered, whether he left it there or carried it about with him, particularly as the times were so unsettled, he confided it to the care of his adopted mother, Makihape, who faithfully kept it in her possession, concealed in the middle of a bale of natu, which, along with others, was also always conveyed to whatever island or distant place she went to reside. So Mariner had Mariner had the books of the Port-au-Prince, the journal, the logs, and everything. Because remember, in the earlier chapters, they did burn the books, Mariner's books and writings and whatnot. And so he hid the log of the Port-au-Prince and other journals that he kept under Belgatu and gave it to his mom, Finau Hape, to take care of it wherever they went. And it seems like Finau Hape took care of it and hid it so that Finau couldn't find it wherever they were. Now here we're here in almost year 4, and they were able to protect those writings from when they got there. When she left Vava'u to go and live with her father at the Hapai Island, she gave it up to Mr. Mariner, who concealed it in the middle of a barrel of gunpowder, without the knowledge of anyone else, for although he had at the time considerable power and influence, and a sufficient number of confidential friends, he thought it best to conceal it in a safe place where no native was likely to find it, and consequently no ridiculous prejudice likely to deprive him of it. To get it again into his possession, he obtained the captain's consent to detain Finau Fishi, the king's uncle, on board till the journal was brought to him, and according 2 natives were dispatched with directions where to find it. So his mom goes back to Hawaii. He gets the book and puts it down deep down into a barrel of gunpowder. But now he's saying he doesn't trust that he'll get it back. But really, he didn't have any reason not to trust anybody else because it was Finau Ulukalala that had and Tui Tui, his assistant Tui Tui, that had the thought of the reading and writing was witchcraft. It was them that they needed to hide it from. I don't think you really necessarily needed to hide it from Moigagomo, especially since I think. But this goes to show how much caution he took moving around. But I'm sure he could have convinced this female to read and write because that's what he wanted to do. He wanted to learn. He wanted to be educated, and I'm sure he would have been able to convince him. But just to be safe, he told the captain to keep Finau Fisi on board until they brought his writings, his journals to him. They had orders at the same time to bring back with them three English men who were on shore: James Waters, Thomas Brown, and Thomas Dawson. In the meanwhile, Finau Fisi, on understanding that he was detained a prisoner, turned very pale and was evidently greatly alarmed. Even Mr. Mariner explained to him the cause. He seemed still to think everything was not right, and expressed his apprehension that they were going to take him to England to answer for the crime of Popeye people in taking the Port-au-Prince and murdering the crew. So this is the mentality of the low intellect, right? Because when we read earlier in the book, there was a lot of pillaging and fighting and killing of people all over, up and down the shores and oceans and South America and so forth. But we look at the mind of Finau Fisi. Oh, I'm gonna have to go answer for the Port-au-Prince. Like England doesn't care about the Port-au-Prince like that, right? Like there's a lot of people who cared about who were concerned and worried about that, right? Um, but it goes to show the lower. They just don't know. Obviously, they didn't know what was going on out there in the world, but they were so worried. It's like a kid being worried that my dad's gonna beat me because I got in trouble at school type thing. I think it's funny. But yeah, Fisi is that worried. The other assured him that his fears were groundless, for as he was not a party concerned in that sad affair, the English people would never think of punishing the innocent for the guilty. True, he replied, and you know that I have always befriended you, and that I am not a treacherous character, and that rather than assist in taking a Papalangi ship, I would do all that lay in my power to prevent such an outrage. To this Mr. Mariner cordially gave his assent, and the chief seemed quite satisfied. His people in the canoes were, however, far from being so. They raised great clamors and loudly demanded his liberation, and even his own appearances could scarcely remove their apprehension. Finau Fisi told Mr. Mariner that he should have been particularly sorry to have been taken away when his nephew was just in the infancy of his reign, and might want his counsel and advice, and thus be deprived of the pleasures of seeing him grown, govern prosperously, and make his people happy, which from his ability and excellent disposition he had no doubt would be the case. At length the canoe returned with the journal, and the Englishman James Waters was not disposed, however, to return to England. He was an old man and had become infirm, and he reflected that it would be a difficult matter for him to get his bread at home. And as he enjoyed at Vava'u every convenience that he could desire, he chose to end his days there. There you go. Palangi guy in Vava'u that chose to stay there, the one who died there. James Waters. So Finau Fisi, he was a good guy. He wasn't like his brother Ulukalala. He was grateful to watch both Moingangongo and Soku Mariner grow up to be great leaders in Tonga. But there are three guys. So James Waters, Thomas Brown, and Thomas Dawson. And James Waters decided to stay because he's just an old man. He said, you know what, I'm good. I enjoy it here, Robo. I'd rather die here because I may not be able to make it all the way back. Finau's sister, a girl of about 15 years of age, went on shore and brought on board several other women of rank who were all greatly pleasured that they were allowed to come into the ship and satisfy their curiosity. She was a very beautiful, little, lively girl and proposed in joke to go to England and see the white women. He asked if they would allow her to wear the Tonga dress, though perhaps she said that would not do in such a cold country in the winter season. I don't know what I should do at that time, but Toki tells me that you have hot houses for plants from warm climates, so I should like to live all the winter in the hot houses. I'm talking about greenhouse, obviously. Could I bathe there 2 or 3 times a day without being seen? I wonder whether I should stand a chance of getting a husband. But my skin is so brown. I suppose none of the Papalangi men would have me. And it would be a great pity to leave so many handsome young chiefs at Lavau and go to England to live a single life. If I were to go to England, I would amass a great quantity of beads and then I should like to return to Tonga. Because in England, beads are so common that nobody would admire me for wearing them. And I should not have the pleasure of being envied. She said laughingly that other that either the white men must make very kind and good-tempered husbands, or else the white women must have very little spirit for them to live so long together without parting. That's an interesting comment, right? Because she's saying that either the white men must have very kind and good-tempered husbands. So she's saying that the reason why a man and woman would stay together is because the man must be well-tempered, good husband, patient, all of that. It's either that, or else the white women must have very little spirit for them to live so long together without parting, right? It's either the men are really nice or the women are just really weak, is basically what she's saying, for them to stay together for so long, right? Because obviously, what she's saying and what she's insinuating is that men and women in Tonga don't stay together too long, or they don't stay together long. They part from each other because the women can't stand the men, and only weak women stay with the men that abuse them, or weaker men or more softer men will stay with stronger women. That's the only reason why they would stay together. Other than that, it seems like parting ways from a covenanted engagement is common in Tonga because of this problem. Unwell-tempered men. She thought the custom of having only one wife a very good one, provided the husband loved her. If not, it was a very bad one because he would uh, tyrannize over her the more. Whereas if his attention was divided between 5 or 6 and he did not behave kindly towards them, it would be very easy to deceive him. What is she saying there? She's saying, let's see what she's saying. She thought the custom of having only one wife a very good one, provided the husband loved her. If not, it was a very bad one because he would tyrannize over her the more. That's true. As long as it's a monogamous marriage, it's only good if the husband's a good person. That way he's not treating her bad. But at the same time, it goes both ways. She has to make herself useful and not tyrannize him, which she doesn't think is even possible because she's assuming all men have the behavior and the masculinity of a tyrannical person, right? Whereas if his attention was divided between 5 or 6 and he did not behave kindly towards them, it would be very easy to deceive him. Yes, of course. If you're not a good man, your women are going to deceive you and, pretend like they are what they are to you, and probably go out and have affairs. Yes, she's right on that. These observations, of which Mr. Mariner was interpreter, afforded very great amusement. Finau and the late Tonga's son, about 12 years of age, together with the females, now commenced dancing and singing at the request of the captain, which gave the ship's company much entertainment. So now they're on the ship and they're dancing. How nice! Really freaking interesting. Interesting concept. She obviously, even at 16 years old, Moingaho's sister is obviously intelligent for her to come up with these theories or um, these terms or this her thinking and putting things together. And she's obviously heard enough, and they've heard enough to know that yeah, monogamy is what they live, and there's benefits to it. But at the same time, comparing the monogamy relationship in good relationships and good relationships in a polygamous marriage and the evils of both. So she's comparing the two, which is pretty um, admirable, and it shows how intelligent she is. Before the ship's departure, Mr. Mariner was charged with several messages from the chiefs of Oahu to those of Hawaii. Among others, he now sent his strong recommendations of the Potoa to be contented with the Hawaii Islands and not to think of invading Oahu, to stay and look to prosperity of his own dominions, for that was the way to preserve peace and happiness. Tell him again, said he, that the best way to make a country powerful and strong against all enemies is to cultivate it well, for then the people have something worth fighting for and will defend it with invincible bravery. What a noble guy Finau Ulukalala is. Basically telling Mariner, go tell the Hawaii people to Botoa, worry about their country. Worry about, building their own country and making it strong. Fertilize, grow crops and plantations and everything, and give the men something, come to build something worth dying for, fighting for. That way they'll, says here, defend it with invincible bravery. Very true. I have adopted this plan, and his attempts upon Vava'u will be fruitless. Several warriors sent insulting messages to the Hapai people, such as, we shall be very happy to see them at Vava'u, and will take care to entertain them well, and give them plenty of bearded spears to eat. And besides, we have got some excellent toa wood clubs, of which we shall be glad to give them an additional treat. Even the warriors of them. Tell them if they have any problem here that we have plenty of spears we can feed them. We can feed them our clubs and weapons. That we're ready. We're not afraid and we're strong. We hope they will come and see us before they shall have worn out the fine ngatu of which they took away so much when they visited us last, alluding to their late unsuccessful expedition. Hala'apiapi had considerable property at the island of Foa, and he sent a message to an old Matapule residing there, who had been a faithful servant to his father, to gather all his movable property, consisting of some whale's teeth and a considerable quantity of hot mats, and deposit it in a house of his upon the beach, that he might come sometime under cover of the night and secure it. So even Halapi Api is from Hapai. He said he has a lot of property over there, and he wants his matapure over there to put in one of his dad's houses so that he can come grab it when nobody's looking, I guess. Some of our warriors also proposed a plan. If the captain would lend them the use of the ship to kill Tupotoa and his greatest fishing men, in revenge for his murder of their lamented chief, the brave Tuponiua. The plan was for about 200 of the choicest of all warriors to conceal themselves below on board the Favorite, which is the name of the ship, and when she arrived at the Hapai Islands, Tupotoa and many other considerable chiefs and warriors were to be invited on board, and then the boarding netting being hauled up that none might escape, at a signal to be given, the Va'u people were to rush on deck and dispatch them all with their clubs. Now they want to plan to use the ship, the favorite, to go and destroy Tupotoa and all his choicest warriors for what they did to Tuponiua. That's what the Vava'u guys want to do, right? And it sounds like the Trojan horse. We'll go over there, the Trojan horse. We'll hide below the ship, get them all on board, kill them all, destroy them, and then that'll be that. To this course of To this, of course, the captain did not consent. He now consigned to Mr. Mariner's care a present for Mapihape, consisting of a veil of fine Mavaungatu and 5 or 6 strings of handsome beads, and also his tuku, ofatai tuku, love unceasing. His wife also sent her a present of 3 valuable hamoa mats with her ofatai tuku. Interesting term, huh? Ofatai tuku. Now the term they use is ofatai ngata or ofa whatever, but seems like the Hamoa mats were highly looked up product, which were fine mats made in Samoa, and it was usually white, something of fine white um, plant that they used to make their mats with, that were different from the Tongan ones, which is made from the coconut leaves. The ship now prepared to take her departure from Vava'u, and Mr. Mariner to take leave of his Vava'u friends, probably forever. The king again embraced him in the most affectionate manner, made him repeat his promise to return, if possible, to Tonga, and take him back to England, that he might learn to read books of history, study astronomy, and thus acquire a papalangi mind. As to the government of Vava'u, he said it might be consigned to the care of his uncle, who would make a good king, for he was a brave man and a wise man, and withal a lover of peace. So Moingangongo, Finau, tells Mariner, embraces him again, tells him, hey, Mantu, okay, my bigger dad. He just wants to study. He just wants to go to school. He wants to learn, right? At this parting, abundance of tears were shed on both sides. He now returned to his canoe with a heavy heart, and Mr. Mariner felt all the sweet bitterness of parting from much loved friends to visit his native country. He bade a long adieu to the brave and wise Finau Fisi, to the spirited and heroic Halapiapi, natural characters which want of opportunity render scarce, or which are not observable amid the bustle and business of civilized life. The canoe returned to the beach, the ship got under way, and steered her course to the Hapai Islands, leaving Vava'u and all her flourishing plantations lessening in the distance. That was the departure of Mariner from Vava'u, leaving Finau Fisi. the brother of Finau Ulukalala, the one who basically helped raise. He was a nice, he was a good, noble, wise man, leaving his brother, his adopted brother, Moengangongo, the great prince who wanted nothing in life but more education and knowledge. And now Mariner finally leaves Vava'u, finally leaves and is out of Tonga. But they're going to Hawaii, so it'll be interesting in the next chapter to see what they do in Hawaii. Finally leaving. So, yep, no worries. I am going to edit all of this into the first six chapters. I edited it into images and sound and storytelling to make it simple. But that started taking too long because I didn't have time to do it. Now I'm just reading live, and I'm gonna take the lives and edit it into those after I'm done with all the live reads to make it in a more engaging and interesting way of storytelling. Because after that phase, we'll go into the next phase, which is the more AI phase, and on into finding opportunities for actors to act out series, or maybe do cartoon versions of it first, and then into real life series of this story. But now we leave Mariner parts, Toki Gabea parts finally with his brother. They shed tears, uh, farewells, lays, gifts, being traded off, and so much to learn, know, and talk about. And I hope to put it in a more interesting way of telling it in the next phase of the storytelling stuff. Anyways, that is chapter 2, volume 2. The next one will be chapter 3, volume 2. We'll go from there. I think this is where you get to hop by and finally leave Tonga forever. All right. So thanks for joining. For everyone who joined me, those like and follow and share and all that good stuff. And we'll talk more and do more in the next one. All right. Opa, tau